Everything you're about to see in this video is pre-release gameplay, so there are zero spoilers in this video. It's all gameplay that was released before the game launched, so you don't need to be worried at all about spoilers. And I'm just going to let that gameplay speak, no crazy editing, and because of the nature of this piece, I'm also not going to be tossing in any articles or reviews, and you'll understand why soon. I will also not be touching on story, or quite frankly, any element of the game that's spoilerish, because this is not my review. My review will come a bit later. This video instead is about something bigger picture, about how Death Stranding is experienced. Death Stranding's reviews are in, and they are polarizing to say the least. IGN gave the game a 6.7, while EGN gave it a 10. VG247 gave it an adjusted 6 out of 10, while Push Square gave it a perfect score. This may very well be the most wildly divisive critical response we've seen for a game this entire generation. A lot of people do not like the game very much at all. A lot of people think it may be a masterpiece. But today, I'm not here to judge the game, I'm here to argue a case. The case for Death Stranding to be review immune. What I mean is, I think reviews hold value, obviously, it's what I do here, but I think that Death Stranding's reviews are different. I think they're much better suited as a supplement than a judgment. Let me put it this way, I'm about to argue that my future review of the game is meaningless in a lot of ways, so this should be fun. When Kojima broke up with Konami, it represented a bittersweet ending to their relationship. The rumors were concise. Kojima was taking way too much time and spending way too much money on projects and refusing to be roped in by upper management at Konami. He would spend development money on making sure water bottles displayed condensation and quiet looked great sweaty, as opposed to meeting development deadlines. Kojima believed in opposition, in perfection, in the belief of video games as art, something that couldn't and shouldn't be rushed, something that required detail, and sometimes that costs some extra money. The unbiased truth is probably that both sides had a case, and there was likely middle ground that could have been met, but what's clear is Kojima was obviously indeed the artist we knew him to be, because the second that his absence was made known at Konami, they got hard to work on soiling the Metal Gear name with one of the worst games of the generation in Metal Gear Survive, while also canceling essentially every real game they had in production and diving headfirst into their pachinko business, using the Metal Gear name as a selling point. Yeah, it's no secret Konami kinda sucks. But what it created was an opportunity for Kojima to find himself in a situation that embraced his quirks and penchant for ignoring constraints. That would be in his own studio with a publishing partnership with Sony, a place where Kojima could be Kojima, and he would have the money and time to create something that felt and looked like a spiritual successor to his partnership with PT and Metal Gear. But because Kojima treats his work like art, and because it's almost always of the more interpretive nature, it's almost impossible to cast judgment without first-hand experience. Let me explain. We've all probably seen this gameplay. One thing I think everyone that has seen it can agree on is one very simple thing. We have absolutely no clue what is going on whatsoever. This doesn't appear to be a trick. It is a genuinely fresh attempt to create something that is unlike anything we've played. A lot of people have viewed Death Stranding a little cynically, saying that what we've seen is only what we've seen because they don't have anything else to show, because the game is set to fail. Death Stranding is a third-person action RPG of sorts, but that same label can be given to Metal Gear Solid 5, it can be given to Horizon Zero Dawn, it can be given to the That's So Raven game I played on GBA when I was a kid, and Death Stranding is obviously none of those games. And so typically, with a review, or an impressions video, or even an argumentative piece, you can use them as a viewer to understand what a game is foundationally, to give you an idea of whether or not it's worth purchasing. Videos can quickly give you the highs and lows, as well as the information that can bolster whatever pre-existing purchasing bias you have, i.e., I want this game and it sounds like something I'd like, so I'll buy it now after seeing this confirmation. They can also be used to validate or challenge your opinion on a game you've already purchased, as in, I really like Call of Duty's new maps, he hates them, let's see why. From the moment Death Stranding was revealed, it was clear that neither of these things will be possible from a gameplay perspective. So much of the gameplay has been, over the course of the past year, said to be tied into narrative reality. So much of the gameplay has been pushed as this strange mix of current mechanics that it'd be hard to create an elevator pitch for it. What that means is that from a gameplay perspective, there are few objective realities. It's harder to say this flat out doesn't work for the game, because normally you make that judgment within the context of similar games or the genre itself. It's also substantially harder to understand what you're getting yourself into simply from a secondhand account, as you may have never played a game that proffers what Death Stranding does. Now you might be saying, well, a good review will be able to articulate those things, without spoiling some things you may have wanted to go in fresh on. What all this is to say is that before we get to more obvious reasoning, is that Death Stranding's gameplay appears to be something that's going to rub people in dramatically different ways, and that unlike 99% of games released, it's hard to use anything but your own experience as a good and valuable judgment metric. But things get stranger for the game. There are absolutely no story spoilers here, mostly because as it stands today I have nothing to spoil, but I am going to touch on the game's story, not in terms of its details, but instead in the context of this conversation. Metal Gear Solid 5 is a narrative-focused game. That narrative took me weeks after completing to even begin to comprehend what I witnessed and come to a conclusion as to its quality. To this day, years later, I'm not sure I entirely wrapped my head around exactly what Kojima was attempting to convey throughout that game. Its ending was strange, Konami didn't even allow the game to technically be finished. It was polarizing. At the time of its release, I wasn't on YouTube, I didn't receive copies of games, I played the games when they came out, and I read and watched the reviews, and every one of them made the story sound like something I wouldn't understand, and every one of them made their own deductions about what it all meant, and they were all different. Most of the time, it's easy to bounce people's opinions around before a game gets in your hands and formulate your own bias, as already discussed. Usually, those opinions are fairly flat. There aren't a ton of reasons for me not to take into account that a lot of people don't like Borderlands 3's writing. Not only is it fairly unanimous, but it wasn't a puzzle built to be pieced together like Death Stranding. In fact, there's maybe 4 or 5 games a generation where what I'm about to say holds true. There is absolutely no consensus as to the merits of this particular narrative. In fact, even as bias confirmation, even as a tool to validate your own opinion, reviews are going to be all over the place. That's because Kojima made it clear from day one that this story was going to be something that elicited a metric ton of emotions that vary wildly from one person to another. What I take from Death Stranding may be totally different from what you take from Death Stranding. And that's a nice little pitch for most RPGs. You're going to take totally different things from this game, but the reality is that often isn't true. Yet here, it seems to be. That's what good art is. Good art means I can't read Thomas from the Washington Post opinion on the new Banksy painting and go, yep, no point in me seeing this for myself now. And that's not to say that other games do a poor job of being art. It's just to say that other games aren't built to perplex quite like a Kojima game. And that creates a product that can be viewed wildly differently. But there's a bigger reason why I'm making this video, and I think it's more important. But I want to place a conclusion in the middle of this video. Just because someone says Death Stranding is a 6 doesn't mean it is. And that goes to say the same thing for all reviews, but it's even more important here. Just because a game gets bad reviews doesn't mean it's bad, especially when it's built to be something that is not for everyone. But I digress. Back on track. I will be putting out a review of Death Stranding, as I said, but I think we've maybe lost something when it comes to the way we play and view certain games this gen. One thing that everyone seems to be able to agree on about Death Stranding, and maybe the only thing, is that it isn't built the way normal games are. This is something that Kojima has talked about numerous times. This is a game built around its pieces instead of those pieces being built separately. Part of the reason so many games struggle narratively is because the narrative is often treated as an afterthought. It's gameplay first, as it's often supposed to be. This is often the same reason that some games fail to create interesting worlds or environments. The priority simply isn't there. Again, this is simply the nature of the relatively quick development cycles we see with modern AAA publishers. When you prioritize money over collaboration and creativity, these things happen. They have hundreds of people in different departments working on their own things, all creating their own vision of the game in the context of their role. The best games, the games that end up being in Game of the Year conversations, often don't do this. And it's part of the reason you see so many exclusives atop those rungs. Because their studios often operate differently. They're given more time and more resources. Kojima has said time and again that Death Stranding is a collaborative project in every way. The environment, story, and gameplay all built with equal importance, all built with each having to prop up the other equally. What this creates, in theory, is immersion. That's the buzzwordy goal for every game. For the most part, the most immersive games within the industry are the ones that do the best job of prioritizing each of these elements and the way in which they're developed. The Last of Us is the God of Wars. What I think we've lost this gen is the opportunity to go into these kind of games with a blank slate. I don't think it's presumptuous to say that most people know whether or not they're getting the next Hideo Kojima game before they even see it. But we've been so inundated for years with gameplay footage, story teasers, previews, that by the time we get our hands on games, we already believe we know what we're getting. We think we understand the story, the environment, the gameplay, and thus there's a bit of that immersion taken out of the experience. Sometimes that's important. We're often burned as consumers when we don't have enough information, but again, that isn't the case with the Kojima game. The consumer knows whether or not that name merits a purchase. And so, I kind of believe it's admirable and unique that the studio and Sony barely gave gamers anything when it came to this game. And I believe that that's probably the best way to play it. Informationless, confused, unsure. I think that's the biggest draw of Death Stranding right now before the public gets their hands on this experience. How often do you get to go into a game entirely perplexed? How often does a game have the chance to actually surprise you? How often do you get to truly understand everything about a game on your own terms? It's strange to say, but I think one of the best things about Death Stranding's launch, and one of the things that make it more purchasable than a lot of other games, is that no matter which way you slice it, it's going to be a fresh experience because we know so little. The mystery is part of the allure. But I also think that the final key to Death Stranding and its review cycle is time. I'll use some brevity here. The reports of Death Stranding's length have varied almost unrealistically in size. There are reports out there of 100 plus hours of gameplay, there are reports of a 30-hour experience, and then there are the pre-release hype reports that look from a marketing team as to how much content our game is going to have. Death Stranding has always been touted as a meaty game, one that has a lot to do and even more to see. Whether that length strays closer to 100 hours or 30, this isn't something that's going to be quick. But again, the allure of the game is mystery. I think what's going to be most interesting is how much you want to play this game. I think you're going to get out of it what you put into it, and I think the game is going to allow you to assess that on your own terms. The only real thing I have to say about this is that frankly its time doesn't matter. What matters is the density of enjoyment within these hours. Bigger isn't always better, and I know that's incredibly obvious, and it's why I try to be brief, but I've seen so many people say that they don't want to pick this game up because it looks like it's going to be short, or they're going to grow tired of it after 10 hours, and some have said that the reports of the game's length are too large, and it's too long, and they don't want anything to do with the game of that length because they don't have time, and I really think these are poor ways to judge the experience, especially before you touch it. Look, once I turn off Outer Worlds and Call of Duty and immerse myself for my review and spend my time with the game, I'll do my best to articulate my thoughts about what I played and how I played it, and do so in a way that keeps the mystery under wraps, like it really still is for me as of the writing of this piece. And I think that the reviews that are out there right now, specifically some of the YouTube reviews, have done an excellent job of maintaining the mystery and showing and talking about as little as possible, while still doing an excellent job of articulating what the game is in a review context. And I commend each and every one of the people that have managed to do that for doing so. This is absolutely not an anti-review piece. Reviews are valuable, with or without my own bias. They are unbelievably important in an industry that often baits and switches their consumer, lies and deceives, and proffers quantity over quality. Reviews are beyond necessary. Instead, what I have wanted to convey here is that there are literally only a handful of names in this industry. I can count them on one hand that beg you to let reviews be supplements instead of decision makers. That beg you to use reviews as a way to understand your experience, not as a jumping off point as to whether or not you're going to have it at all. So ignore the 6 out of 10s, ignore the 10 out of 10s. Listen to the people you trust the most, the names in the industry, the names of journalists, of YouTubers that you trust, and let those opinions guide you toward the game instead of through it. I think Hideo Kojima is one of those handful of names I just mentioned. Who knows, maybe by the time I finish Death Stranding, I'll hate it, and my opinion of Kojima will be soiled. Maybe instead I'll think it's the greatest game of all time, and I'll forget all about the rest of my current Game of the Year list, but either way, I want to let the game take me where it wants to take me. That's a really rare experience these days. Hideo Kojima, I'm all yours. I want to add a little addendum to this piece, just a short little addendum to this piece. Many of you have hit me up on Twitter or even on YouTube in the comments section about Death Stranding and its exclusivity and whether that matters and if it's important, if you should cancel your pre-order, if you should not play the game. For those of you that don't know, Death Stranding was recently announced as a game that's also coming to PC. It is not a PS4 exclusive. I want to be very clear about this and very concise with how I feel. Death Stranding was never a PS4 exclusive in the sense that Sony owned the IP. Sony doesn't own Kojima's name, it didn't even own Kojima's production studio. What Sony and Kojima have is a publishing partnership, and what that means is that Sony owns the rights to publish the game. They're the people that put out the marketing material, they're the people that box the game and put it on store shelves, they're the people that spend the money to get this game's name out there. Sony doesn't own Kojima, this isn't an exclusivity deal to begin with. Now, it is worth pointing out that the game was kind of marketed and pushed as a PS4 exclusive, but I'm not entirely sure why that matters in the least bit. The more people that can get their hands on this game, the better. And the people that are fans of Kojima and fans of the experience saying they're canceling their pre-orders, they want nothing to do with the game now, this is a bait and switch, this is just a marketing move, are very confusing to me. Why would you want anybody to miss out on this experience? Exclusives in general are anti-consumer, are they not? Forcing someone to buy into a certain ecosystem just to play a certain experience is, by nature and by definition, something that goes against the consumer's best interest. It'd be in the best interest of the consumer to let Death Stranding be on any console, but that's not how that industry works, and that's okay. But what certainly isn't worth being upset about is Death Stranding also being available on PC, especially because it's not coming at launch. All it means is that another group of people are going to get to experience something that you are super excited about. Excited about enough, by the way, to pre-order. So no, I don't think it matters all that much. Sure, it's a bit of a weird move, especially this late in the game, but I digress. Now, it's your turn, guys. I want to know what you think about Death Stranding. Are you interested in the game? Have you seen the reviews? Are you going to be buying it? And most importantly, who are the people, who are the publishers, the developers, the names in this industry that you think deserve a blind purchase? Do you agree that one of them is Hideo Kojima? Is another one of them CD Projekt Red? Who are the people in this industry you trust no matter what? You know the second you hear that name in new game in the same sentence, you are going to be shelling out your cash for it. You will be buying that game. Let me know in the comments down below the answer to any and all those questions. As always, if you enjoyed this video, hit that like button. If you are not yet subscribed, press subscribe. Put out more and more content each and every week. Also, there's a little bell next to the subscribe button. After you press subscribe, press that little bell. All that bell does is make sure you're actually notified when I upload a video, which is a huge deal on YouTube. So press the little notification bell right next to subscribe. That way you'll actually get the videos when they come out. Really quickly, as I stated, I will be putting out a Death Stranding review once I've had my complete time with the game, once I've gotten my hands on what it has to offer in full. As of right now, I am still working on that Promise Call of Duty video and the Promise Second Outer Worlds video, so be on the lookout for that. And until next time, guys, I'm out.